He didn't yell. He didn't slam his fists on the mahogany desk. He just stepped into her space, smelling of cold rain and expensive wool, and backed her against the wall. When his calloused hand brushed her jaw, she squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the violence she knew he was capable of. Instead, his thumb swept heavily over her erratic pulse point. "It'll hurt, but I won't stop," he whispered. And in that suffocating room, her blood ran completely cold. The neon sign outside diner flickered a sickly, erratic pink, casting long shadows across the rain-slicked pavement. It was 2:14 a.m., the kind of hour where the world felt thin, stretched out like a worn rubber band. Cora dragged a damp, bleach-soaked rag across the laminate surface of booth 4. Her arches ached. A dull, rhythmic throb radiated from her lower back, up her spine, and settled behind her eyes. She hadn't slept more than 3 hours a night since Tuesday. It was Friday now, or maybe Saturday. The days bled together in a haze of burnt filter coffee and the greasy smell of deep-fried potatoes. The bell above the glass door chimed. It wasn't a loud sound, but the atmospheric pressure in the diner shifted instantly. Officer Miller, a beat cop who usually spent his graveyard shift nursing a slice of cherry pie in the corner, stopped mid-chew. He looked at the door, quietly slid a $5 bill onto the formica, and walked out the back exit without a word. Cora didn't turn around immediately. She kept wiping the table. She watched the reflection in the dark, rain-streaked window. 3 men, 2 stayed by the door, shaking the water from their dark coats like stray dogs, their eyes scanning the empty booths. The 3rd man walked forward. His footsteps didn't echo on the checkered linoleum. He moved with the quiet, terrifying economy of a man who never had to rush. Adrian Mercer. Cora's stomach hollowed out. The bleach rag slipped from her fingers, landing with a wet slap on the table. She swallowed hard, forcing the rising bile back down her throat, and finally turned. Adrian slid into booth 4, the one she had just cleaned. He didn't look like the monsters on the evening news. He wore a charcoal suit that fit perfectly across his broad shoulders, a crisp white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, and a dark wool overcoat damp with rain. He looked like a tired hedge fund manager. But his eyes were dead. They were a pale, flat blue, the color of winter ice, and they lacked any trace of human warmth. "Coffee," he said. His voice was low, gravelly, carrying the faint rasp of a long-time smoker. Cora walked behind the counter. Her hands shook as she grabbed a heavy ceramic mug. She gripped the glass handle of the coffee pot, pouring the dark liquid. She focused on the steam rising, on the dark, bitter smell, grounding herself in the mundane action. She walked back over and set the mug down in front of him. "You're pouring decaf," he murmured, not looking at the mug, but at her hands. Cora quickly pulled her hands back and wiped them on her apron. "It's 2 in the morning. I figured you wanted to sleep." "I don't sleep, Cora." Hearing her name in his mouth felt like a physical blow. She crossed her arms, trying to stop the tremors vibrating through her ribs. "We're closed in 20 minutes. If you want food, the grill is off." Adrian reached into the inside pocket of his coat. Cora flinched, a microscopic tightening of her shoulders, but he only pulled out a silver cigarette case. He didn't light one, he just turned the metal box over in his long, scarred fingers. "Your brother," Adrian started, his tone conversational, as if they were discussing the weather, "is a remarkably stupid man." The air left Cora's lungs. Theo, her idiot, desperate, gambling-addicted older brother. She had known this was coming. She had known it since Theo vanished 3 days ago, leaving his apartment tossed and his phone disconnected. "I don't know where he is," Cora said, her voice tighter, higher than she wanted it to be. "I do," Adrian replied softly. He looked up, pinning her with that flat blue stare. He's currently sitting in a chair in a basement off Industrial Avenue, trying to explain to my associates how he managed to lose $80,000 of my money on a rigged greyhound race. 80,000. The number echoed in Cora's skull. It was an impossible sum. It might as well have been $1 million. He doesn't have it, she whispered. I'm aware. Adrian picked up the coffee mug, took a slow sip, and set it down. Which presents a problem. In my line of work, unpaid debts set a bad precedent. It encourages the rats to bite. I can't have that. So kill him. The words tore out of her throat before she could stop them. They were harsh, jagged, born of years of cleaning up Theo's messes, bailing him out, starving so he could feed his habits. But as soon as they landed in the quiet diner, she regretted them. A tear burned hot and fast down her cheek. She angrily wiped it away. Adrian watched her. For the first time, a flicker of something resembling curiosity crossed his face. He tilted his head. You don't mean that. I don't have $80,000. I know exactly what you have, Cora. You have $312 in a checking account. You drive a rusted sedan with a failing alternator. You work 50 hours a week here, and another 20 cleaning office buildings. He stated the facts without judgment, a cold, clinical autopsy of her pathetic life. You have nothing of monetary value. Then why are you here? She asked, her voice cracking. Adrian reached into his pocket again and pulled out a heavy, cream-colored card. He slid it across the table. It had a single address printed in embossed black ink. Nothing else. Because a life for a life is an old-fashioned metric, Adrian said, standing up. He dropped a crisp $50 bill next to his barely touched coffee. But a life of servitude. That yields a return on investment. Be at that address at noon tomorrow. If you're late, I'll send you Theo's hands in a cardboard box. He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and walked out, his two shadows following him into the rain. Cora stood frozen in the buzzing fluorescent light, staring at the card until her vision blurred. The address belonged to a massive, corrugated steel warehouse on the edge of the shipping district. The sign above the loading dock read, Vanguard Logistics. But the trucks parked in the lot had no company logos. The air smelled of diesel exhaust, damp concrete, and the salty rot of the nearby river. Cora pulled her failing sedan into a space near a chain-link fence. The engine knocked violently before dying with a pathetic shudder. She sat behind the wheel for a full 10 minutes, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. Turn the key, drive away, let Theo rot. The thought was loud, rational. It was the smart play. Theo had made his bed. But the image of her brother, the one who used to read her comic books when they were kids, the one who bought her a cheap plastic tiara for her 10th birthday, flashed in her mind. He was an addict. He was broken. But he was blood. She killed the headlights, grabbed her purse, and stepped into the biting wind. A man the size of a commercial refrigerator stood by the side entrance. He wore a heavy Carhartt jacket and had a face that looked like it had been struck repeatedly with a heavy object. He didn't ask her name. He just looked at the card in her hand, opened the heavy metal door, and pointed up a flight of concrete stairs. Cora climbed. With every step, the noise of the warehouse floor faded, replaced by an eerie, insulated silence. At the top of the stairs, she pushed open a heavy oak door and stepped into another world. The front operation was rust and diesel. This was mahogany, leather, and quiet, ruthless wealth. The floors were dark, polished hardwood. The walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, though they held leather-bound ledgers and lockboxes instead of literature. Behind a massive desk sat Adrian Mercer. He wasn't wearing a jacket today. His white sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and laced with faded, jagged scars. He was writing in a ledger, a pair of reading glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. He looked remarkably human. "Sit," he said, not looking up. Cora walked to the leather chair opposite him. Her legs felt like lead. She sat on the edge of the cushion, keeping her back rigidly straight. Adrian finished a line of text, capped his fountain pen, and took off his glasses. He leaned back, lacing his fingers over his stomach. In the harsh daylight pouring through the skylight, he looked older, exhausted. The lines around his mouth were deeply etched, carved by years of stress and violence. "You're 5 minutes early," he noted. "Where is he?" Cora asked. She hated how small her voice sounded in the cavernous room. "Sleeping. Safely, for now." Adrian unlaced his fingers and leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "I don't run a charity, Cora. $80,000 is a drop in the bucket for my organization. But as I said last night, it's about the principle. Your brother stole from me. He has to pay. He can't. Therefore, you will." "I can pay you," Cora said quickly, desperate to steer the conversation into normal, understandable metrics. "I can give you $200 a week. I'll get a third job. Adrian laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. It was a short, sharp exhalation of breath, utterly devoid of humor. $200 a week. It would take you nearly 8 years to pay off the principal, let alone the VIG. By the time you finished, you'd be dead from exhaustion, and my patience would have expired 7 years prior." Cora swallowed. "Then what do you want?" "I don't have anything else." Adrian stood up and walked around the desk. Cora's body went rigid. Her survival instinct screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to stay planted in the chair. He stopped beside her, leaning his hip against the edge of the desk. He was too close. She could smell him, a mix of sandalwood, starch, and something cold and metallic beneath it all. "I don't need your money. I don't need you to clean floors," Adrian said slowly, his voice dropping an octave. "My world is complicated. The people I deal with, the rooms I walk into, everyone is constantly looking for an angle. Everyone is lying. It's exhausting." He reached out. Cora flinched, pulling her head back. Adrian paused, his hand hovering in the air. He didn't force the contact. He just let his hand fall to his side. "I need someone on my payroll who doesn't come from my world," he continued. "Someone sharp, someone desperate enough to be loyal, but smart enough to see the things my men miss. I need a front, a companion for dinners, a set of eyes at events where men talk too much after 3 scotches. I need an asset." Cora stared at him, trying to process the demand. "You want me to be a... what? A spy, an escort?" "You will not be touched," Adrian said sharply, a flash of genuine anger sparking in his dead eyes. "Not by me, not by anyone. If a man lays a hand on you, I will remove his hand from his wrist, understand?" Cora nodded slowly. "You will move into the penthouse above my club. You will quit your jobs. You will be available to me 24 hours a day. You will attend the functions I tell you to attend, wear what I tell you to wear, and listen to the conversations I tell you to listen to. You will do this for exactly 1 year. At the end of that year, Theo's debt is clear, and you walk away." It was madness. It was signing away her life, stepping voluntarily into a cage with a predator. But as she looked at Adrian, she saw the cold calculus in his eyes. He meant every word. It was a business transaction. "And Theo?" she asked. "He gets a bus ticket out of the state and a stern warning never to return. If he crosses state lines before your year is up, the deal is void." Cora looked down at her hands. Her fingernails were bitten down to the quick, the cuticles frayed and bleeding from anxiety. She thought of the smell of the diner, the aching in her back, the constant suffocating weight of poverty. And then she thought of Theo, bleeding in a basement. She looked up, meeting the mob boss's eyes. "Deal." Adrian didn't smile. He just nodded once. "Go pack a bag. The driver is waiting downstairs. 2 weeks later, the smell of bleach and burnt coffee was a distant memory, replaced by the suffocating scent of expensive truffles and aged Bordeaux. Cora sat at a corner table in Laura, a private restaurant where a steak cost more than her rent used to be. She was poured into a floor-length emerald silk gown that felt like water against her skin. A diamond collar rested heavy against her collarbones. She looked like old money. She felt like a fraud about to be executed. Adrian sat beside her, radiating a quiet, lethal tension. Across the table sat Fletcher, a rival syndicate boss who controlled the dock unions. Fletcher was a heavy-set man with wet, greedy eyes and a laugh that sounded like wet gravel. "It's a simple territory dispute, Mercer," Fletcher said, chewing on a piece of bloody meat. He pointed a fork at Adrian. "My boys need room to breathe. Your boys are squeezing the northern roots." "The northern roots belong to me, Fletcher," Adrian replied calmly. He took a sip of his wine. He hadn't touched his food. "There is no dispute. There is only a boundary you are currently thinking about crossing. I'd advise against it." Cora focused on breathing. In, out, just like Adrian had taught her over the past 14 days. "Don't look at their faces," he had told her. "Look at their hands, look at the people standing behind them, listen to the silences." She let her eyes drift past Fletcher. 2 of his men stood by the private dining room door. They weren't relaxed. The taller one had his hand resting subtly inside his jacket. The shorter one was sweating, his eyes darting to the service exit every few seconds. Under the table, Cora shifted her leg, pressing her knee lightly against Adrian's thigh. One tap. Danger. Adrian didn't break eye contact with Fletcher. He didn't even blink. "I think we're done here, Fletcher. You have my answer." Fletcher's face darkened, turning an ugly shade of plum. "You're getting arrogant, Mercer. Arrogance gets men buried. Arrogance is a flaw," Adrian agreed softly. He set his wine glass down. The click of the crystal against the table sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Preparedness is a virtue." Adrian snapped his fingers. It was a small, sharp sound. The service doors swung open. 3 of Adrian's men stepped into the room, assault rifles hanging casually from tactical slings. At the same time, the tall man by the door, Fletcher's man, was suddenly flanked by another of Adrian's enforcers, a heavy blade pressed discreetly but firmly against his kidney. Fletcher froze, a piece of steak halfway to his mouth. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking sickly and old. "Enjoy your meal, Fletcher," Adrian said, standing up. He buttoned his suit jacket, perfectly calm. He held out a hand to Cora. "My associate and I are leaving. I expect the northern roots to remain quiet." Cora took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and entirely steady. She stood, forcing her knees not to buckle, and let him lead her out of the room. They walked through the opulent corridors of the restaurant, past the terrified waitstaff, and out into the cool night air where a black armored SUV was waiting. The moment the heavy car doors closed, sealing them inside the soundproof cabin, the adrenaline crashed out of Cora's system. Her lungs seized. She couldn't get enough oxygen. Her hands started to shake, a violent, uncontrollable tremor that rattled the diamond bracelets on her wrists. She pressed herself against the far door, curling inward, trying to make herself as small as possible. The reality of what had just happened, the proximity to imminent bloody violence, crushed her chest. Adrian watched her from the other side of the seat. He unbuttoned his collar, loosening his tie. "Breathe, Cora," he commanded quietly. "They had guns," she gasped, her voice shrill, frantic. "He was going to kill us, that man by the door. He was reaching for a gun." "I know, you did well. You signaled me." "I'm not a soldier," she practically screamed, the facade finally shattering. Tears, hot with panic, spilled over her carefully applied makeup. "I'm a waitress. I can't do this. I can't sit in rooms with men who want to put bullets in our heads and pretend to drink wine. I'm going to get you killed. I'm going to get myself killed. The SUV pulled into the underground garage of his building. The tires squealed faintly against the polished concrete. Adrian didn't say a word until the car stopped. The driver stepped out, leaving them alone in the dim light of the garage. Adrian slid across the leather seat. Cora shrank back, pressing her spine against the door panel, but there was nowhere to go. Adrian didn't grab her roughly. He reached out and placed one large, warm hand flat against her sternum, right over her racing heart. The weight of his hand was immense, anchoring her chaotic body to the physical world. "You survived tonight," he said, his voice a low rumble in the quiet car. "I barely survived. I'm terrified." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Panic gets you killed. You need to learn the difference." "I don't want to learn," she sobbed, trying to push his hand away. He didn't budge. He was immovable, a mountain of dark intent and terrifying calm. "I want my miserable, safe life back. Let me go, Adrian. Please, just let me go." Adrian leaned closer. The smell of cold air and danger rolled off him. He wasn't looking at her lips or her body. He was staring directly into her terrified, tear-filled eyes. "You don't want that life back," he stated softly. "You were rotting in that diner, bleeding out slowly to keep a brother alive who would sell you for a quick fix. You were a victim to your own loyalty." "You're a monster," she whispered, her hands gripping his wrist, unable to pry him off her chest. "I am," he agreed without hesitation. "And I'm going to tear every piece of that old, pathetic life away from you. I'm going to break your weakness. I'm going to forge you into something that no one can ever victimize again. Not your brother, not Fletcher, not the world." Cora squeezed her eyes shut, terrified of the intensity in his gaze, terrified of the dark, undeniable truth in his words. She was changing. She could feel the soft, vulnerable parts of herself calcifying under his pressure. "It hurts," she choked out, a final, desperate plea for mercy. "The stress, the fear, it hurts." Adrian shifted, his hand sliding up from her chest to grip her jaw. His thumb swept heavily over her erratic pulse point, pressing just hard enough to let her feel his absolute control. "It'll hurt, but I won't stop," he whispered, his breath ghosting over her cheek. And in that suffocating, leather-scented space, Cora's blood ran completely cold. She realized then that he wasn't just claiming her time to pay a debt. He was claiming her soul, piece by piece, and he would not let her go until he had completely remade her in his own image. The penthouse didn't feel like a home. It felt like a high-altitude observation deck designed by a sociopath. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping, panoramic view of the city's skyline, rendering the millions of lives below into a meaningless grid of yellow lights. The furniture was minimal, expensive, and violently uncomfortable. Slate, glass, brushed steel. There were no photographs, no books with cracked spines, nothing that suggested a human being actually lived here, let alone loved here. Cora spent her first 3 days pacing the perimeter. She was a ghost, haunting her own life. She wore the clothes Adrian's tailor had delivered. Cashmere sweaters in muted greys, tailored slacks that cost more than a year of her community college tuition. They felt heavy. They felt like a uniform. On the 4th morning, a low, guttural vibration broke the sterile silence. Cora froze near the kitchen island. She slowly turned. Standing in the hallway corridor, blocking her path to the bedroom, was a massive German shepherd. The dog didn't bark. It didn't wag its tail. It stood completely still, its dark eyes locked onto her with a terrifying, calculated intensity. Its coat was a dense, immaculate black and tan, and thick muscle corded beneath its skin. It wore a heavy tactical harness, equipped with a handle and heavy-duty steel clasps. "Don't move!" Adrian's voice cut through the air. He stepped out of his office, wearing dark dress pants and a white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, a towel slung over one shoulder. He looked at Cora, then at the dog. "His name is Ghost," Adrian said calmly. He walked over to the kitchen counter and poured a glass of water. "He is an active duty protection asset. He spent 4 years running perimeter sweeps for private military contractors overseas before I bought out his contract." Cora's heart hammered against her ribs. The dog hadn't twitched. "Is he going to kill me?" "Only if I tell him to," Adrian replied, taking a drink. "Or if you try to leave through the private elevator without my explicit vocal clearance." He set the glass down and snapped his fingers. Fuss. The dog immediately broke its statue-like posture and trotted to Adrian's left side, sitting perfectly square, its eyes flicking up to Adrian's face, awaiting the next command. The precision was chilling. It wasn't a pet. It was a loaded weapon with a pulse. "He doesn't respond to affection," Adrian instructed, wiping his face with the towel. "Do not try to pet him. Do not offer him food. He eats raw meat once a day, weighed and portioned. If you respect his space, he will ignore you." "You live in a fortress," Cora whispered, wrapping her arms tightly around her cashmere-clad torso. "Dogs trained for war, men with guns at the doors. Who are you hiding from?" Adrian stopped. He turned his head, his pale blue eyes pinning her down. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I'm not hiding, Cora," he said softly. "I'm holding ground. There is a vast difference. The men who want my territory don't send strongly worded letters. They send bullets through windows. Ghost ensures that if someone breaches the glass, they will leave pieces of themselves behind." He walked toward her. Ghost stayed perfectly glued to his side, matching his stride, inch for inch. Adrian stopped just a foot away. The sheer physical presence of the man and the animal was suffocating. "You think this is a cage?" Adrian murmured, looking down at her pale, tense face. "It's a bunker. Out there, you were meat for the grinder. In here, you are untouchable. You need to start understanding the value of that." "I understand the value of freedom," she shot back, though her voice shook. Adrian leaned in close. "Freedom is a myth sold to people who punch time clocks. There is only power, and the lack of it." He straightened up. "Platz." Ghost instantly dropped into a tactical down position on the slate floor. "Get dressed," Adrian ordered, walking toward his bedroom. "Black suit, hair pulled back. We have a meeting in an hour. You're going to see how my world actually operates." The boardroom of Vanguard Logistics smelled of ozone, burnt coffee, and raw panic. It wasn't a glamorous Mafia sit-down in a dimly lit Italian restaurant. This was the cold, sterile heart of corporate warfare. A long, polished mahogany table dominated the room. On one side sat 3 men in cheap, wrinkled suits, sweating profusely. On the other side sat Adrian. Cora sat in a chair slightly behind Adrian's right shoulder, a silent observer in a tailored black suit. Ghost lay under the table at Adrian's feet, a dark shadow blending into the carpet. The men across the table owned a mid-sized trucking company, or rather, they used to. The acquisition clauses are standard, a sharp-featured man sitting next to Adrian was saying. This was Davis, Adrian's lead corporate attorney. His voice was slippery, coated in false sympathy. "Vanguard assumes all your operational debt, which, looking at these ledgers, is substantial. In return, we absorb your fleet and your routes. You walk away clean. No bankruptcies, no broken kneecaps." The oldest of the 3 trucking executives, a man with a greying mustache and a trembling hand, looked up at Adrian. "It's a hostile takeover. You've been undercutting our freight prices for 6 months, bleeding us dry on purpose." "It's capitalism, Mr. Henderson," Adrian said, his voice flat, devoid of malice or triumph. It was just a fact. "You failed to adapt to market pressures. Vanguard is offering you a lifeline." "You're stealing our livelihood." Another man muttered bitterly. "I'm purchasing your failure," Adrian corrected. Cora watched the exchange, her stomach churning. This wasn't bloody violence, but it was violence nonetheless. It was the systematic, legal slaughter of a man's life's work. She looked down at the thick binder of financial disclosures resting on the table in front of Davis. The pages were open to a complex spreadsheet. Cora wasn't an accountant, but she had spent the last 5 years balancing a checkbook down to the penny, stretching $30 across a week of groceries, and meticulously tracking Theo's stolen cash. She knew how desperate numbers looked. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes scanning the columns. Something didn't match. The depreciation assets claimed on the trucking company's fleet didn't align with the maintenance invoices listed on the adjacent page. Without thinking, the waitress who had survived on hypervigilance spoke up. "They're lying about the trucks," Cora said. The room went dead silent. Davis, the slick lawyer, snapped his head around to glare at her. The 3 men across the table went completely white. Adrian didn't look at her. He didn't flinch. He just held up a single finger, silencing Davis before the lawyer could speak. "Explain," Adrian commanded softly. Cora swallowed hard. She pointed a trembling finger at the ledger. "Column 4. They're claiming depreciation on 22 rigs, but the maintenance logs on page 47 only show tire and oil swaps for 14 vehicles over the last 18 months. You don't let 8 commercial rigs sit idle unless they're dead. They don't have 22 working trucks. They have 14. The rest is scrap." The silence stretched, thin and brittle. Adrian slowly turned his head to look at Henderson. The older man's face was slick with terrified sweat. He opened his mouth, closed it, and stared at his hands. "Davis," Adrian said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, gravelly register. "Did my legal team fail to verify the physical assets before drafting a buyout agreement?" The lawyer swallowed loudly, tugging at his collar. "Mr. Mercer, the paperwork provided by their auditors, I don't pay you to read their fiction," Adrian interrupted, his tone lethal. "I pay you to know the truth." Adrian stood up. Ghost immediately stood up beneath the table. The shift in the room's gravity was instantaneous. "The deal is dead," Adrian told the 3 executives. "You lied to me. Now Vanguard takes the roots and we leave you the debt. Try to operate a single truck in this county by Monday, and I will burn your warehouse to the foundation. Get out." The men scrambled over themselves to leave, abandoning their briefcases in their terror. When the door clicked shut, Adrian turned to Davis. "You're fired. Leave the binder. If you practice corporate law within 500 miles of this city again, I'll have you removed. Understand?" Davis nodded frantically and practically ran from the room. Adrian and Cora were alone. The air was heavy, charged with residual adrenaline. Adrian slowly turned to face her. His pale blue eyes were analytical, stripping away her tailored suit to examine the gears turning in her head. 14 trucks, he mused. "I'm sorry," Cora whispered, stepping back. "I shouldn't have spoken. Stop apologizing." Adrian stepped toward her. He reached out, and this time, Cora didn't flinch. She just held her breath. He lightly brushed a stray strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was shocking. It wasn't violent, but it wasn't gentle either. It was possessive. "I told you I needed a set of eyes that didn't come from my world," he said, his thumb lingering on her jawline. "They were trying to sell me rusted metal for the price of gold. My lawyer missed it because he was looking at the legality. You caught it because you know what poverty looks like when it tries to hide." He dropped his hand. "You just saved me $400,000, Cora. Does that mean Theo's debt is clear?" she asked, her voice tight. Adrian let out a slow, dark breath. "No. The terms of your year remain. But it means you are no longer just a debt collector's collateral." He picked up the heavy binder and handed it to her. The weight of it settled in her arms. "You're moving up. Welcome to the firm." It happened on a Tuesday. The rain was coming down in thick, grey sheets, turning the city into a blurred, watercolor nightmare. Cora sat in the back of the armored SUV, her head resting against the cool glass. The heater blew dry air across her shins. She was exhausted. The past 3 weeks had been a relentless crash course in Adrian's empire, reviewing ledgers, attending silent dinners, learning to read the microscopic tells of violent men. Adrian sat beside her, typing an encrypted message on a secure tablet. Ghost was curled on the floorboards, a solid mass of muscle and heat. They were taking the elevated highway back to the penthouse. The traffic was light, the wiper blades snapping rhythmically against the windshield. "Fletcher is quiet," Adrian murmured, not looking up from the screen. "Too quiet. Is that bad?" Cora asked, rubbing her temples. "Loud enemies are stupid. Quiet enemies are planning." The words had barely left his mouth when the world exploded. A deafening metallic crunch shattered the quiet of the cabin. The SUV violently lurched sideways. Cora was thrown hard against her seatbelt, the air punched from her lungs. A heavy commercial tow truck had slammed perfectly into their rear passenger quarter panel, spinning the 3-ton armored vehicle out of control. The world spun in a dizzying wash of grey rain and concrete barriers. The SUV slammed into the guardrail with a sickening screech of tearing metal, stopping dead. Cora's ears rang. The smell of deployed airbags and scorched rubber filled the cabin. She tasted blood in her mouth. She had bitten her tongue. "Down!" Adrian roared. He didn't wait for her to process the command. His heavy hand slammed into the back of her neck, physically forcing her face down into the leather seat. The crack, 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 crack. The sound of high-caliber rifle fire hammered against the reinforced glass. Spiderwebs of white fractured across the window just inches above Cora's head. The glass held, but the structural integrity was compromised. "Ghost! Wah!" Adrian shouted. The dog instantly went rigid, a low, terrifying snarl rumbling in its chest. Eyes locked on the fractured windows. Adrian unclipped his seatbelt with ruthless efficiency. He didn't look panicked. He looked like a machine switching from standby to combat mode. He drew a matte black heavy pistol from his shoulder holster, checking the chamber in one fluid, practiced motion. "Listen to me." Adrian gripped Cora's shoulder, his fingers digging into her collarbone. His pale eyes were completely dialed in, devoid of humanity. "Fletcher hired professionals. They're boxing us in. Our driver is unconscious." Cora looked toward the front. The driver was slumped over the wheel, blood pooling from a gash on his forehead where the airbag had ruptured. "I'm going to open the door," Adrian said, his voice a rapid, staccato burst of information. "You are going to roll out, stay below the chassis line, and crawl to the front engine block. You do not stand up. You do not look around. If you freeze, you die. Do you understand?" "I can't," Cora sobbed, hyperventilating. Panic, cold and absolute, gripped her chest. "Adrian, please, I can't." "You can. You will." His grip tightened until it hurt. "I will not let you die on this concrete, Cora. Move." Adrian kicked his heavy boot against the warped metal of the door. It groaned, popping open a few inches. The sound of the rain and the gunfire roared into the cabin. He threw the door wide open. "Go!" Cora moved on pure, blind terror. She scrambled over the leather seats, dropping out of the cabin and splashing onto the flooded asphalt. The rain instantly soaked her through the suit. She hit her hands and knees, the coarse gravel tearing at her skin. Above her, Adrian stepped out of the vehicle. He didn't run. He planted his feet, brought his weapon up, and began returning fire with terrifying, rhythmic precision. Pop, pop, pop. Cora scrambled toward the front of the SUV. The engine block provided heavy cover. She curled into a tight ball against the front tire, clamping her hands over her ears, screaming into the rain as bullets sparked against the armored plating above her. "Ghost! Fass!" Adrian roared. A black and tan blur shot out of the SUV. The German Shepherd launched itself over the hood of the car, moving with lethal, terrifying speed. A second later, a man's agonizing scream echoed over the sound of the rain, followed by the sickening sound of snapping bone and tearing fabric. Adrian moved up to the front of the car, slamming his back against the hood near Cora. He dropped an empty magazine and slammed a fresh one home. Blood was running down his left arm, soaking through his white shirt, mixing with the rain. He looked down at her. She was shaking violently, drenched, covered in grease and her own blood. He knelt down, grabbing her face with his uninjured hand. His touch was smeared with rain and grit. "Look at me," he commanded. She opened her eyes. "You're breathing," he said, his chest heaving slightly. The gunfire had momentarily stopped. The tactical silence was deafening. "You survived the hit. You're still here." "You're bleeding," she stammered, staring at his arm. "It's just meat." He dismissed it entirely. He pulled her slightly closer, his face inches from hers. The rain plastered his dark hair to his forehead. "This is the bleeding edge, Cora. This is the reality of the world you're in now. You didn't freeze. You moved. You fought for your life." A dark, twisted pride shone in his icy eyes. In that moment, crouched in the rain behind a bullet-riddled car, smelling gunpowder and wet copper, Cora realized the horrifying truth. The diner was gone. The girl who wiped down tables was dead. Adrian was breaking her down, yes, but in the violent, bloody crucible of his world, he was forging her into a weapon. And God help her, a small, dark piece of her soul was beginning to lean into the fire. The cleanup crew arrived before the police sirens even registered in the distance. They were 4 men in nondescript grey raincoats. They didn't speak. One drove a flatbed truck equipped with a heavy-duty winch. Another tossed a thick, chemical-soaked blanket over the body of the sniper ghost had torn apart on the asphalt. Cora watched it all from the back seat of a secondary vehicle that had materialized from the storm. She was wrapped in a foil emergency blanket. Her hands were still coated in grease and a thin layer of Adrian's blood. She stared at her fingernails. They looked foreign. The dirt packed beneath them belonged to a different woman. Adrian sat beside her. He was pressing a thick gauze pad against his left bicep. The bullet hadn't lodged. It was a clean through and through, but it bled with a steady, pulsing rhythm. His face was a mask of pale granite. They rode back to the penthouse in total silence. When the private elevator doors opened into the foyer, Adrian didn't go to the kitchen or his office. He walked straight down the long, shadowed hallway to a room Cora had never been allowed to enter. He kicked the heavy oak door open. It wasn't a bedroom, it was a trauma bay. Stainless steel tables, surgical lights hanging from the ceiling, cabinets stocked with rows of intravenous fluids, and a reinforced refrigeration unit. It smelled intensely of bleach and iodine, a sterile counterpoint to the blood and rain soaking their clothes. "Sit," Adrian ordered, pointing to a metal stool. He didn't wait for a doctor. He didn't make a phone call. He walked to a sink, turned on the hot water, and began scrubbing his uninjured hand with a stiff, bristled brush. Cora dropped the foil blanket. She was shivering, a deep, bone-rattling tremor that started in her jaw and echoed down to her knees. She watched him strip off his ruined suit jacket. The white shirt was plastered to his back, heavily stained with red. He gripped the collar and tore the fabric down the seam, exposing the raw, jagged wound on his arm. He opened a cabinet, pulled out a suture kit, a bottle of clear antiseptic, and a local anesthetic syringe. "You're going to do it yourself." Cora's voice was a hoarse whisper. Adrian uncapped the antiseptic with his teeth and spat the plastic lid onto the floor. "Calling Hayes takes 40 minutes. I'm losing too much blood to wait." He poured the bottle directly over the open wound. He didn't scream. His jaw locked, the muscles in his neck cording like thick steel cables. A sharp, violent hiss escaped his teeth. but his hand didn't shake. Cora stood up. She didn't know why. The rational part of her brain, the waitress, the victim, screamed at her to stay seated, to stay out of the way of the violent man doing violent things. But the woman who had crawled through the mud under heavy fire moved forward. She walked to the sink, picked up a second scrub brush, and washed the grease and blood from her hands under the scalding water. She dried them on a sterile towel. She walked over to the metal table. Adrian was struggling to load the curved suture needle with one hand. His fingers were slipping on the slick metal. Cora reached out and took the needle driver from him. Adrian froze. His pale eyes snapped up, locking onto hers. The silence in the surgical room was absolute, broken only by the hum of the overhead lights and the heavy sound of their breathing. "Sit down, Cora," he warned. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. "You don't have the stomach for this." "You're shaking," she replied flatly. "You can't anchor the knot with one hand." She didn't wait for permission. She swabbed the entry wound with a fresh iodine pad. The flesh was torn, angry, and bubbling with dark blood. Her stomach violently rolled, a wave of nausea threatening to drop her to the floor, but she swallowed it down. She remembered patching up Theo when he came home with split lips and busted knuckles from loan sharks. This was worse, but the mechanics were the same. Clean, close, bind. She pushed the curved needle through the tough outer layer of his skin. Adrian inhaled sharply, but he didn't pull away. He sat perfectly still, allowing her to work. "Fletcher crossed a line today," Adrian said, his voice a low, rough rumble. He was staring at the wall, focusing on the pain. "He didn't just target a supply route, he targeted me, in public." "He missed," Cora said. She pulled the thread taut, tying off the first knot. "In my business, a miss is just a delayed funeral. You don't survive an assassination attempt and go back to negotiations. You burn the man's house to the ground while he's sleeping." Cora tied the second knot, snipped the thread. "How?" Adrian finally looked at her. His eyes tracked the steady movement of her hands. "Fletcher has a fortress. Men, guns, political cover. I can't touch him physically without starting a war that will bleed onto the streets and bring the federal government down on all of us." "So you take his money," Cora said quietly, moving to the exit wound on the back of his arm. "I take his logistics. I take his unions. If he can't pay his men, they turn on him. Loyalty in this world is a rented commodity. When the checks stop, the guns point the other way." Cora finished the last suture. She wrapped his arm in thick gauze, taping it down tight. She stepped back, dropping the bloody needle driver into a metal tray. It landed with a sharp clatter. She looked at her hands. They were steady. "I have the ledgers from the trucking company," Cora said, her voice dropping, taking on a cold, analytical edge she didn't recognize. "The ones Davis missed. Fletcher uses the northern dock unions to move his freight, right?" Adrian nodded slowly, pulling a clean black t-shirt over his head. "Yes. The trucking company was claiming depreciation on phantom trucks. If they were laundering money through ghost vehicles, they were likely paying ghost union fees to Fletcher's foreman. We don't need to shoot Fletcher. We just need to prove to the union bosses that Fletcher is stealing from their pension funds." Adrian stopped. He stared at her, the pain in his eyes entirely replaced by a sharp, dangerous calculation. Cora looked back at him. She wasn't terrified anymore. The fear had burned out on the highway, leaving only a cold, hard clarity. "Give me access to Vanguard's banking records," Cora demanded. "Give me the union payout lists. I'll find the bleed." Adrian slowly walked toward her. He closed the distance until he was standing mere inches away, towering over her. He reached out with his uninjured hand, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw, smearing a tiny speck of his own dried blood onto her cheek. "You understand what you're doing?" he whispered. "If you do this, you aren't a captive anymore, Cora. You're an accomplice. You pull this trigger, you cross a line you can never walk back from. Cora didn't blink. She thought of the rain. She thought of the glass shattering over her head. "Show me the ledgers," she said. For 4 days, the penthouse became a war room. The sprawling glass dining table was buried under mountains of paper. Bank statements, union rosters, shell company registrations, and encrypted wire transfer logs. Ghost lay under the table, a silent sentinel, occasionally resting his heavy chin on Cora's foot. Cora slept exactly 4 hours a night. She lived on black coffee and sheer, unadulterated adrenaline. Adrian sat across from her. He was coordinating the street-level logistics, quietly repositioning his men, buying up debts owed by Fletcher's lieutenants, preparing the board for a checkmate. But the actual weapon, the kill shot, lay in Cora's hands. She wasn't looking for a smoking gun. She was looking for a pattern. "Here," Cora rasped, her voice rough from disuse. It was 3 a.m. on a Friday. The city below was a sprawling grid of silent yellow lights. Adrian looked up from his secure tablet. Cora pushed a thick stack of highlighted papers across the glass. "Fletcher isn't just skimming, he's bleeding them dry. Look at the local 405 union payouts." Adrian picked up the paper, his eyes scanning the numbers. "The union dues are collected weekly," Cora explained, tapping her pen against the glass. "Fletcher funnels 30% into a holding company called Apex Logistics. Apex is supposed to be an equipment leasing firm, but cross-reference the tax IDs." She slid another paper forward. "Apex doesn't lease equipment. Apex pays consulting fees to a shell corporation in the Caymans, a corporation registered to Fletcher's sister-in-law. He's taking the pension money from his own dock workers and dumping it into offshore real estate. $7 million over the last 3 years. Adrian sat back in his chair. The silence in the room was heavy, thick with the weight of what she had just uncovered. It was brilliant. It was fatal. In the underworld, you could kill a man's soldiers and he would rebuild. You could bomb his warehouses and he would rebuild. But if you proved to his working-class muscle that he was stealing their retirement money to buy yachts, they would tear him apart with their bare hands. "You found the artery," Adrian murmured. He looked at her, really looked at her. Cora looked awful. She had dark circles under her eyes. Her hair was tied back in a messy knot, and she was wearing one of Adrian's oversized grey sweatpants and a simple black tank top. But to Adrian, she looked terrifying. She looked like a weapon fully unsheathed. "Package the data," Adrian commanded, standing up. "Print the ledgers, highlight the transfers, put it in 3 separate dossiers." "Who are they going to?" Cora asked, her fingers already flying across the laptop keyboard. "The 3 union chapter presidents," Adrian said. He walked to the window, staring out at the city he was about to conquer. "I'm going to have them delivered to their homes at breakfast. By noon, Fletcher's men will refuse to load his cargo. By sunset, his lieutenants will realize the money has stopped. By midnight, Fletcher will be a ghost." Cora hit print. The heavy laser printer in the corner hummed to life, spitting out the architecture of a man's ruin. She sat back, rubbing her eyes. The exhaustion suddenly hit her like a physical blow. The adrenaline crashed, leaving her hollow and entirely numb. She had just orchestrated the destruction of an empire. She, Cora, the waitress who used to cry over a broken alternator. Adrian walked back to the table. He didn't say a word. He just reached down, scooped her up, and carried her to his bedroom. He didn't touch her. He laid her on top of the dark, heavy duvet, pulled a blanket over her shoulders, and walked out, closing the door behind him. For the first time in her life, Cora slept without dreaming. The fall of Fletcher was bloodless, and therefore entirely terrifying. It happened exactly as Adrian predicted. The dossiers landed. The union bosses verified the numbers. The docks shut down. When Fletcher tried to rally his men, he found empty warehouses. When he tried to access his offshore accounts, he found them frozen. Adrian's cyber contacts had seen to that. 3 days after the files were delivered, Adrian and Cora sat in the private dining room of Laura. The atmosphere was entirely different this time. The waitstaff moved with hushed reverence. Adrian's men didn't stand by the doors with tense shoulders. They lounged in the hallway, completely relaxed. The territory was secured. Cora wore a backless black silk dress. The diamond collar was gone, replaced by a simple, terrifyingly expensive platinum chain. She held a glass of dark red wine, staring at the deep color. She didn't feel like an imposter anymore. The clothes fit, the air fit. The heavy mahogany door opened. Fletcher walked in. He looked 10 years older. His suit was rumpled. He had no men behind him. The arrogant, greedy mob boss who had threatened Adrian a month ago was gone, replaced by a desperate, hollowed-out shell of a man. Fletcher didn't sit. He stood at the end of the table, his hands shaking slightly. "You took everything," Fletcher said, his voice a ragged croak. Adrian didn't look up from his steak. He cut a small piece, chewed it slowly, and swallowed. He took a sip of his wine. He let the silence stretch, forcing Fletcher to marinate in his own humiliation. "I took what you surrendered when you decided to shoot at my car," Adrian finally replied. His voice was bored. "My men, they want my head. The union bosses put a bounty on me. I can't leave the city. I can't stay." Fletcher gripped the back of the empty chair. "I'm dead, Mercer." "You are," Adrian agreed. "You're just waiting for the dirt." "Buy me out," Fletcher pleaded, the last shred of his pride snapping. "Give me $2 million. It's a fraction of what my roots are worth. Give me $2 million, let me charter a plane out of the country, and the northern docks are yours." Uncontested, Adrian set his knife down. He leaned back, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin. He didn't answer Fletcher. Instead, he turned his head and looked at Cora. "What do you think, Cora?" Adrian asked casually. "Does he get the $2 million?" Fletcher stared at her. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and frantic. He was looking at the woman he had dismissed as a mere escort, realizing that her hands were on the levers of his execution. Cora set her wine glass down. The crystal clinked sharply against the wood. She looked at Fletcher. She didn't see a mob boss. She saw the men who used to come into the diner and scream at her because their eggs were cold. She saw the loan sharks who had beaten her brother. She saw a world of men who took and took and took, assuming the weak would always just bleed for them. "He shot at us," Cora said. Her voice was perfectly level. "Cold." "He did," Adrian agreed. "He hired professionals. He intended to put a bullet in our heads, leave us on the highway, and steal your territory." Factually accurate, Cora met Fletcher's terrified gaze. "If you give him $2 million, he will disappear. But men like him don't stay disappeared. In 5 years, when he's burned through the cash, he'll find someone else to back him, and he'll come back for his pride." Fletcher's face drained of the last remaining drops of color. No, I swear to God, Mercer, I'm out. I'm done." Cora looked back at Adrian. "We don't pay men for their failures, and we don't finance our own future liabilities." Adrian smiled. It was a terrifying, genuine expression of pride. He looked back at Fletcher. "You have your answer. Leave the restaurant, Fletcher. Try not to bleed on the carpet on your way out." Fletcher opened his mouth to argue, but the door behind him opened. 2 of Adrian's men stepped inside. They didn't draw weapons. They just placed their heavy hands on Fletcher's shoulders and backed him out of the room. The door clicked shut. Silence descended on the room again. Cora picked up her wine glass. Her hand didn't shake. "He's a dead man," she stated. "By morning," Adrian confirmed. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. He pulled out a heavy, cream-colored envelope and tossed it onto the table in front of her. Cora frowned. She picked it up and broke the wax seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a promissory note. Theo's debt, $80,000. Across the bottom, stamped in heavy black ink, was the word cleared. Underneath the note was a cashier's check made out to Cora for $500,000. Cora stared at the paper, the numbers blurred. "Your brother is free," Adrian said. His voice had lost its conversational tone. It was tight, constrained. "The check is your consulting fee for the Fletcher acquisition. You're liquid. You can buy a house in the suburbs. You can go back to school. You can disappear." The year wasn't up. It had barely been 2 months. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Adrian stood up. He walked around the table and stopped behind her chair. He didn't touch her, but she could feel the heat radiating from him. The overwhelming gravitational pull of the man. "Because keeping you here as a captive is an insult to what you've become," Adrian said softly, his voice rumbling right next to her ear. "You aren't a hostage anymore, Cora. You're a predator. If I keep the collar on you now, you'll eventually chew through my throat." He stepped back. "The driver is downstairs. He'll take you wherever you want to go. You have your freedom." Adrian turned and walked toward the exit of the private dining room. He moved slowly, deliberately. Cora looked down at the check. $500,000. It was safety. It was the life she had prayed for every night while wiping down linoleum counters. It was peace. She looked at the door. Adrian had his hand on the brass handle. Peace felt remarkably like a cage. "Adrian," she said. He stopped. He didn't turn around. Cora stood up. She left the check and the promissory note on the table. She picked up her wine glass and walked across the room. The silk of her dress whispered against the hardwood floor. She stopped directly behind him. She reached out and placed her hand flat against his back, right over the hidden holster of his gun. "I don't run a charity, Adrian," she said, mirroring the words he had spoken to her on that first day in the warehouse. Adrian slowly turned around. His pale blue eyes were burning. The mask of indifference was entirely gone, replaced by a raw, consuming hunger. "I found the bleed in Fletcher's empire," Cora said, stepping into his space, tilting her head up to meet his gaze. "I closed the wound on your arm. I don't want a buyout. I want a partnership. Vanguard is expanding. You need someone to watch the ledgers. You need someone who knows how the rats think." Adrian stared down at her. His chest heaved once, a sharp intake of breath. He reached up, his large, scarred hands framing her face. His thumbs swept fiercely over her cheekbones. "If you stay," he warned, his voice a dark, rough promise. "There is no exit. There are no more checks. There is only this, the blood, the war, the perimeter. You are mine, and I am yours, until the ground takes us both." "I know," she whispered. "It'll hurt," he reminded her, echoing the night he tore her old life away. Cora didn't flinch. She leaned into his touch, her eyes dark, cynical, and entirely unafraid. "Then you better not stop," she replied. Adrian crushed his mouth against hers, effectively sealing the contract, as the doors of the underworld locked firmly and willingly behind her. Did Cora's ultimate choice to embrace the darkness leave you stunned? She walked in as a pawn to pay a debt, but she walked out as the queen of Adrian's empire. If you loved this deeply emotional, high-stakes journey of survival and power, hit that like button right now. Don't forget to share this video with everyone who craves intense, grounded mafia drama where the heroine fights back. Subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you never miss another thrilling story. The underworld is always waiting, and we'll see you in the next one.
Daughter. Heinz's work is so sick. Truly, truly so sick. And the coffin kind of makes me no longer want to be cremated. I know, right? It's so good. Heinz, always. You're fucking amazing. You're amazing. You can color on any surface. Oh my gosh. Okay. Here we go. You already know what I'm drawing. This is great fun. The first coffin that doesn't look scary for me. Yeah, exactly. I'd go for that one.